Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Lauren.
Okay, I have a joke for you today.
For me?
This is so bad. I used to work for the circus.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I was a human cannonball. Until they fired me.
That's good. I like that one.
Thank you. Took me a long time.
Welcome back to our podcast, What They Don't Say, where we have been sexually assaulted by the same man, and that's our credibility.
Woo!
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw. I have a question for you.
For me?
Oh my god, stop doing that.
Sorry.
Earlier today, we were kind of reminiscing. I don't even want to use the word reminiscing.
You and I?
But we were like looking back. Shannon was watching videos of
yes,
herself that she took while she would like have phone calls with people throughout the whole like investigative like trial process. And it just like brought back like a lot of memories, I think, for Shannon. And like something that I was thinking about was, wow, like this fucking sucked. So much cock. And I was like, how do you get through something like that? And for me, music was always something that like I turned to as kind of like a coping mechanism, but also just an outlet, I guess. And so my question for you is, like, during any of this time, like it could have been during trial, you know, before you testified, even just like throughout these 2 years, was there like any type of music or specific songs that you listened to?
So BSA, before sexual assault, I was like, I liked
BSAA. Sorry.
I listened to just like normal EDM music, like, you know, like club chill, like woo woo, as well as like a lot of throwbacks. Yeah, exactly, just like that. And then I found that I had such like an internal anger and sort of like, I would say just like this abundance of emotion that I was feeling inside, and I frequently was trying to find ways to like get that out. So whether that was like driving a fast car or going on runs or listening to like really, really loud music. And for a while I felt like the current music that I had been listening to was just like, it wasn't enough. And I like tried to listen to some metal music. It wasn't for me. So this is where the Wubbz came in.
The Wubbz.
So I kind of got into like the harder EDM stuff, which like I feel kind of funny saying that. But I seriously went from listening to like Tiesto and things like that to like Excision, and I guess like Alice in Wonderland isn't really like, that's not really Wubbz necessarily. But I seriously was like, I found this music that made me feel like all those intense emotions that I was feeling inside were able to be like outside of my body. And that was like the music I like began listening to. And now obviously I'm a Wubbz lover. Lauren recently went to her first
Oh my god, guys.
EDM concert. It was Subtronics at Red Rocks, and boy was that a crazy time. She loved it.
Well,
We dragged her there.
So I've never really understood like the hard EDM thing, and I like EDM music
Because
just the softer, like kind of more chill, you know, like Odessa. Fuck with that. I love it. But I never understood the really hard EDM that like you listen to. And I remember before we went to Subtronics, you were so concerned with like, oh my god, Lauren, like you're gonna have a really bad time, like this is like not your music. Like
you weren't originally gonna go. Like I was saying, like you should come to Subtronics, kind of jokingly.
Yeah.
And then like the day before Subtronics, you and your boyfriend broke up, and you were like, I want to go. You wanted to wear the cool outfit. You wanted to do the hair. You wanted like glow sticks on. You were like, I'm in. I'm fucking ready.
Well, yeah.
Because you experienced pain.
Yeah.
And that's where the Wubbz came in to save you.
So once that happened, like I never understood it, but Shannon was always like, yeah, like I started listening to this because I don't know, like I just needed an out. Like I had so much inside me, like so much pain and anger, and this music like helped release that. And I was like, okay, like that's kind of weird. Like, I don't know.
You're like, how can my
brain though? No, but like honestly though, my brain went to like, you've watched Dead to Me, right?
Yeah.
And you know how like after her husband is killed, she like sits in her car and just like listens to heavy metal music, and it's just like fucking like raging. And like that's what I was thinking of. But yeah, I think that I was like in this state of like I was really angry about a lot of things, and you were like, do you want to come? And I was like, honestly, fuck it. Like, let's do it. And I get it now. Like, we were there and like the music, you just like feel it in your body. And you are just like, you kind of just like move with the music. And like, I could really see how that could be like such a huge outlet for you. Like, that was the first time where I was like,
bass goes deep.
Fuck yeah. Like, I get it. Like, we were just head nodding. Like, there was no tomorrow. Head banging. Thank you. I don't know the term. Head nodding.
Yeah, let's go. No, Lauren was in it. She had 2 pigtails that had they were fishtailed, like she braided them. And first of all, those bitches are like fucking weapons attached to your head.
Oh, I know.
She was like twirling around. She was head banging like a mofo. It was awesome.
My neck was sore the next day.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you embrace the experience, but I really think like you were saying, like, you know, people who have never been to an EDM concert or like a harder EDM concert or who don't listen to hard EDM, like it's a weird thing. You're like, it literally sounds like a bunch of robot and like metal machines like having sex. Like, how can you like that? Or people don't understand like how it's actually an art form. Like, it is hard to create these strange sounds that you're hearing. But on top of all of this, like, I always think, and my roommate too, my current roommate, who I also like lived with in college and stuff, like she's like rave girly. Like, she's been to all the festivals, she's done all the things. Now she's like entering her mom era where she's like, you know, goes to bed on time and like, you know, is more responsible. But any Hoosers, like she went through a lot. And like I went through a lot and you went through a lot. And I think this music really comes in like when you're in that like that peak low where you're like, fuck, I don't know where to find this. And then all of a sudden like Spotify or somebody in your life like recommends this sort of music to you. And then when you hear the little like and like the ear tickles and shit and that like deep bass wub, and then your face makes that like that nasty bass face, it just like brings it out. And frankly, it makes you feel a whole lot better because like I said earlier, it was for me like the only thing that I felt like represented the pain that I felt inside. It brought it kind of like to life. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like comforting in a strange way. Yeah. Did you? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say now whenever I meet someone who like listens to hard EDM, I'm just like, who hurt you? What did you go through?
Yeah, but then that's the great thing is because like if I go to a concert like Zach Bryan, here we have a poster on the wall. If I go to a Zach Bryan concert, like I'll know some of the songs, but I will feel really left out for a lot of them because I won't know the words. And people who love Zach Bryan will be going in and you'll be enjoying it. But if you're just someone on the outside, then you just like sit there and you can't really have a good time. But like everybody can go to an EDM show, go to a hard EDM show and get into it. And that's like, it's this inclusive thing. And so everyone who's been hurt and who loves hard EDM is there and just wants to love you for being there too, because they're like, shit, man, we know that you got your shit fucking rocked at one point in your life. And that's why you're here. And we're just here to love you and listen to Wubbz.
Yeah. I mean, I cried.
Yeah, she cried a lot.
Cried at Subtronics. Yeah. Like, obviously, I needed to release some shit. But like, we went with a group of friends and one of my friends turned to me and he was like, Lauren, like, how are you doing? And I like go from like smiling and laughing and like just like dancing. And I look at him, he goes like, how are you doing? And I just started sobbing. Yeah, for like 10 minutes. I was like, he was like hugging me and I was just like sobbing for 10 minutes. Like it was an emotional roller coaster, but I do understand the value of that music now. And I have a newfound respect for it that I definitely did not have before. And I'm glad I can understand you more because of it.
Yeah. She'd be like, oh, why are we playing this shit in the car? I have a headache or...
Yeah. But now I'm like, oh, yeah, I get it.
Because you're just sad.
Because you're just sad.
Did you? I mean, obviously you didn't start listening to Wubbz. Did you do any whack shit when you were going through the process of investigation, trial, court, etc.?
I don't know about like whack shit, but I think that there was like a few albums actually that I listened to that got me through. And this wasn't necessarily like actually for trial, I had a whole pre-trial playlist that I would play in the car when we were driving to the courthouse, like me and my mom and my dad. And I would just like have my headphones in and it was just a lot of like, you're a bad bitch. Like you got this. You're going to be like totally fine. Like there was some Sia on there. She has some really just like beautiful, powerful, like I am amazing, like blah, blah, blah. I don't know. So I listen to a lot of Sia. I just think that she conveys power really well, and I really loved that. And then also Kesha's Praying.
Oh, okay. I thought you were about to say like TikTok or something.
Yeah.
By Kesha.
Wake up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy.
No, Praying's a good one though.
Praying is such a good song, and she obviously like went through her own really terrible fucked up experience with the music industry, but I think the way that she has then poured that into her music has been really cool and beautiful. And so that song, I don't know, like you just put your headphones in, you're listening to it, it's so powerful. And I was like, yeah, like I can fucking do this. Like I got this. I'm a badass. And that gave me a lot of confidence during a time that felt really just awful and draining a lot of the time. And it was just really empowering. Like you had to empower yourself in order to put yourself in a situation like that. So I think that music was really great for me. And then kind of like afterwards, I think honestly post-trial was a time that I had I think I felt a lot of the trauma. And I could
that was the sad girl.
Totally sad girl vibes for
full blown depression. Like Breathe Me by Sia, right? That's the one that's like, it's you've never listened to that?
Oh my God,
it's
wait.
brutal.
Let's look.
That's one. Did you ever listen to Panic Room?
Yes, you showed me that one. That was like the first song you sent that to me.
Welcome to the Panic
Yeah.
Room. I felt like that. I don't remember. Maybe I can try to link it in the bio of this episode or something. But
that one's really
Panic
great.
Room. And another person who was involved in the case actually sent me that song too. And I felt like it's saying like welcome to the panic room, and it's like talking about how like your biggest fears have like come to life. And I felt like that song was perfect because it's like, hey, the panic room is like the courtroom, and this like fucking scary man who assaulted me and several other people, like I'm about to face him, and like I'm entering into that space. But then there's kind of like a strong undertone. But like I don't even listen to that song anymore because it brings me like right back. I've just like,
yeah, that shit
hands
makes
off.
you cry. I think Unstoppable by Sia is
I'm unstoppable.
Yeah, exactly. That one was really good. I also have like Fighter by Christina Aguilera on here.
Because you have to be like, you need some sort of pump up pre-trial.
Like,
and the
it's
reason
literally it's like a pre-game playlist, which sounds weird, but it's true. Like you are like, all right, I need to like get hyped up. I need to get ready for this. I need to,
because your soul is about to be sucked right out of you.
Exactly.
About to be gone.
Exactly. Okay. Well, speaking of soul sucking activities, there were many of them.
Blowjobs.
Sure. Depends on who you're giving it to. Some are more soul-sucking than others.
Never mind.
Yeah. Okay, so no. We're going to talk about our parents now. I think that one of the moments in my experiences where things became really real was when I told my parents. And I told my mom first, and then a few days later I told my dad. But I think that it's really hard to know what to say or how to go about it, or even like what to expect. Like, how are your parents going to respond? Like, are they gonna
I think a PowerPoint would be a good option. Just I have some like a nice hook, like, and this is where my life changed, and then it's just I was raped, and then another slide that's like, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. From here on out, now you know why I'm sad.
Yeah, that's not quite how mine happened, but I was about to say maybe next time. That's awful.
No more rape.
Let's hope there is never ever a next time. We're not even gonna speak that. Okay.
Yeah. No bad juju.
Anyways, moving on. Yeah, Shannon, how was that like experience for you? Like, do you think it was overall positive, or was it like not positive, but did they respond well, or was it just like?
Well, they was mainly my mother. Mm-hmm. My stepdad also knew, like I told him as well, but I would say as a general rule of thumb, it was fairly negative for a long time, because I think my mom felt a lot of responsibility for what had happened, because the man who had assaulted me was someone that was considered like a son basically for my mom, and like my stepdad was his mentor, and there was all of these like intertwined pieces that she had with him. And because it happened in her house, I think she felt really responsible for what happened, but her response didn't necessarily say that. It kind of turned into her being like focusing on the wrong aspects of the assault instead of her showing me a lot of sympathy or empathy. Over time, like as time went on, like things did get better, but it was pretty hard at first just because I think my mom blamed me a lot for like drinking and things like that. And at first it kind of came off as blame for me. But how would you rate your experience as a whole? 1 to 10? 1 to 5 stars.
It was just like fine. Maybe walk us through what was said, what the conversation was like, and just kind of give more details into what that experience was overall like for you.
Yeah. So I want to preface this story with that I love my mom. My mom is a lovely being. She is very kind. She is incredibly giving. But I do think that this experience kind of is going to shed a bad light on her. So I just want that to be known out of the gate. So a few days after I was assaulted, I had a therapy appointment set for like 3 days later or something. That was just, I was going to therapy weekly. It was nothing out of the blue. And I had walked in, I had like a folder from the hospital, and I just like dropped it on my therapist's desk just because I didn't want to have to say like, hey, I was assaulted over the weekend. Like, here's my update. I just wanted to be able to like give her something that would say that. And obviously her and I started talking through it, and she said, you need to tell your mom. And I was really scared for a few reasons. One, because there was drinking involved in my assault, and my mom is really not okay with drinking. It's something that she does not like. She does not condone, none of that. And 2, because we were drinking in her house. And 3, there was a part of me that my mom would think that it was consensual or something, and that I was saying that it wasn't. Overall, I was just worried that my mom was going to look at the wrong things. So I literally, like, I told my therapist this. She was very insistent on me telling my mom very soon in case, like, I did want to start an investigation and all of that. And so she scheduled, like, an emergency appointment for that afternoon. And then my mom came in, and it was the 3 of us. My therapist was sitting here. My mom was sitting in the other chair, and then I was sitting on the couch. So it's like a little triangle. And I just started with, Mom, I was raped, and like I was shaking, I was on the verge of tears, and then I told her the whole story, and her face like consistently was getting more and more like, oh God, like fuck, like well, she would never say fuck, but it was just a like, oh my gosh, I can't believe my daughter had gone through this. That's what her face was saying. But then one of the first things that came out of her mouth after I told her was, you were drinking, instead of the you were raped. It was you were drinking. And my therapist very quickly was like, yeah, this is not about the drinking. And my mom, like, I could see that she had all of these things that she was feeling that she wanted to say, and she just really needed to, like, rein it in. That was the initial thing. And then my mom wanted me to call my stepdad, so I called him and told him. And it was a very awkward phone call. I know, it was really weird. I didn't.
Yeah, I would not have like that.
I wish I didn't do it that way. But it was just kind of like, hey, this is what happened. And I think the other reason that they really needed to know is because this man was somebody that was, like I said, like fully intertwined in our lives. Like we would have, like my stepdad probably would have been playing tennis with him that afternoon if I didn't say something. And following that, like it was a very awkward, like car ride home later that day. My mom had a lot of questions. Like I was not met with a whole lot of like, I'm so sorry, what do you need right now? I was met with like, well, how did this happen? And what were you wearing? And like, where in the house were you? And like, what time of night was it? Why was he there so late? And like, my mom was fully aware that this man was going to be at our house that night. So like, she had allowed him to be there, but it's not her fault. But yeah, overall, I was just met with like a lot of questions, not a lot of comfort, not what I needed from my mom, but like I didn't have a choice. Like I felt like I really needed to tell her to prevent this man from like being in my house the next day. And there was a lot of consequences like following that. But I think that you should share your story of like telling your parents, because like I told my parents really soon after. Mm-hmm. And for you, I think it was a little bit different. Like what were you met with? How did your parents respond?
Well, I kind of want to backtrack and actually talk about a few things that you just said.
Oh.
I think
For me?
I think that there, you know, the whole kind of response of like, what were you wearing? You were drinking, like things like that are responses that women in particular are often met with after being sexually assaulted or even like pressing charges or things like that. And it's this quick, I would say, like reaction to somehow place blame on the girl or the woman who was assaulted, right? By being like, well, your skirt was too short, or like your boobs were out, or whatever it may be, or like, well, you were drinking, so like maybe you like it was actually consensual and you don't know it, and things like that. And like that is 100% the wrong mindset, the wrong response, the wrong reaction. That is not okay, and we need to move away from that in our society. And it's like fucked up that we still do that and that people still do that, because that's just not the right way to be thinking about this thing. It's never your fault. You are not the one to blame. And even like survivors do this too, where you place blame on yourself, like automatically. You're like,
in a
well,
state of like
maybe,
denial.
yeah, you're like, well, maybe if I hadn't done this, then it wouldn't have happened. Like maybe if I had said no louder or like anything. And it's so fucked up that we have been taught, it's like ingrained in us to somehow shame and blame ourselves for these things that have happened, and it's just not right. And we can't be doing that, and there's no room for doing that in our society anymore. And so while like that must have been really tough for you to kind of sit there and be like, well, fuck, because knowing you were already probably trying to find like some sort of blame to put on yourself and your story, and then to have like your mom even be like, well, you were drinking, like could it have been your fault, kind of thing, that just reinforces all these like intrusive thoughts that you're already having. And I think that's really tough, but I think that maybe your mom was also feeling a lot of blame, and so maybe in a backwards fucked up way she was trying to like release some of the blame that she was feeling by putting some of the blame on you, which sounds fucked.
And just to kind of clarify a little bit, like the comment from my mom of like, what were you wearing? That was literally like a one-off comment. Like my mom was really focused on the drinking aspect, on the like, how could this happen sort of thing, rather than the clothes thing. So just side note, my mom was more focused on the drinking rather than like, what were you wearing? But I do get that a lot. Like that was a frequent question, and it wasn't necessarily a frequent question in like the court process where they asked what I was wearing, which was good. I was kind of ready and like expecting that. But that is a common thing that women get, is like, oh, what were you wearing? It was spaghetti straps. Were your boobs out? Whatever. And like in this scenario, I was literally wearing like my shit pair of sweatpants, the ones where like you're at the end of your laundry, as well as like a quarter zip. I hadn't washed my hair in like 5 days. Like I wasn't wearing any makeup. Like I was crusty dusty. So just to clarify.
I mean, it doesn't even matter though. Like,
true.
It doesn't matter how you looked or like what you're wearing, blah, blah, blah. But I also think that, to kind of go back to your mom's reaction really quickly, I think that as your mom, she obviously really cares about you. And this wasn't coming out of a place of, you know, malice intent or anything like that. It was just, I think she so badly wanted to understand how this could happen that her response was more of a gut reaction, and everything in society, especially for older generations, has kind of placed those misconceptions into their heads, right? So I think that in order for her to try to understand, it just kind of went to like, well, when I was growing up, like I was taught like, don't dress like this, because if you do, guys are gonna want you, and like blah blah blah, and like that's what they were taught growing up. Therefore I think that was kind of just a natural, maybe more so reaction for her than it is for us, because now we have conversations about this topic, we talk about it in our education system, we talk about it more generally, you know, in social settings, whereas I don't think it was like that when our parents were growing up.
Yeah.
So
and like
tough.
Consent is not like, just to clarify, like, you know, consent is like, aside from it having nothing to do with what you're wearing, because it's like a verbal thing, or because it's a body language thing. And like your clothing has nothing to do with body language. Like how much you're drinking, like it can have an effect on what you're saying. And obviously, like, there is some sort of, you know, parameters to think about there. But like, there are things that say if you're too drunk to, you know, speak properly or all of this, then like, you're obviously far too drunk to consent. That brings it back to the, like, the bike video. If someone was fucked out of their mind and
she means drunk. Someone was drunk out of their mind.
To bring it back to the bike video, if someone was incredibly drunk and was basically blacked out, like, you couldn't just force them to ride a bike. Like, it's literally the same thing with consent. If someone is blacked out, you can't force them to drink tea. Like, it's just this consent has nothing to do with drinking. Like, it is just simply, they are two separate zip codes. Like, they have nothing to do. Consent is also not the same as what you were wearing. Like, consent is its separate entity.
Yes. I also think that my mom told me this story. It's a movie. I don't know what movie it is. I can't remember, but my mom was telling me this like movie where a girl gets her ponytail caught in something and she's drunk and she's like freaking out and her friends are drunk and she's like, just cut my ponytail off because that was just like where her thought process was going. And so they like cut her ponytail off. And then the next morning she was like, why the fuck would you guys do that? Like, I was drunk. Like, I did not know like what I was saying or what I was doing. Like, why the fuck would you cut my ponytail off? And I know it sounds stupid, but like my mom brought that up when she was like talking about consent because, you know, if like the person you are hooking up with is really hammered, they don't have like as much control over what they're saying and their faculties and things like that. And so as a partner, you should respect that and be like, hey, you know what? Like, you're really drunk. This is not something we should do right now because that you really isn't consent. You really can't.
Yeah.
And so it's just like something to keep in mind. And like, even like I would do that. Like if I'm hooking up with someone, like a guy, and they're like really drunk, I'll be like, hey, like this just doesn't, like, let's not do this right now. And that's okay. Like it ain't that deep. Just, yeah.
Especially in new scenarios and stuff. And like, if you've never even gone into any sort of like sexual realm with anybody, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in that when you're drunk, like, you know, we all know that drinking lowers inhibitions. We all know that you get kind of those beer goggles. And so it's this thing of understanding that like drinking essentially disables you from being able to consent. If we were thinking like settings, like an iPhone setting or an Android setting, when drinking is turned on, then consent is turned off because you are simply not operating at your traditional like level. Like, you are actively different. Drinking on, consent off.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to say too, that it's kind of switching gears, but you kind of mentioned this in the beginning when you were talking about how the guy that assaulted us was a very good family friend. You know, like he was very tied in with your mom and with your stepdad and things like that, which made it a lot more complicated. And I think that another misconception that we might as well just bust.
Get it out there.
Get it out there right now while we're talking about
right through it.
Is that oftentimes women or girls are assaulted by people they know. And I think that it's a misconception that it, you know.
Or men. Like,
right. Or men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. And I think it's kind of in like my mind when I didn't really understand sexual assault and rape. I always thought it was like a stranger for the most part. And, you know, it's like in an alleyway or like whatever. And obviously that can happen and it does. And that's awful. But oftentimes it really is like people that are like closest to you that end up actually assaulting you. Which is really confusing because you think that shit gives you trust issues. Let me tell you, you think you trust someone, you think they're a good person, you've known them a good amount of time, they've had no reason for you not to trust them, and then they do something like this. That shit fucks with you, and it fucks with your future friendships and relationships, and it's way too common.
Well, and it's because they have created this space for themselves where it's easier to assault people if you are much closer with the parents, with the friends, with the family, and whatever. And like, I think specifically in our scenario, the man that assaulted us, like I was saying, he was like, my stepdad was his mentor and there was all this, but we need to remember here that my mom lost a son, like, you know, X amount of years before this. And so for my mom to, you know, not have a whole lot of strong connections with younger men who, were like the same age as my brother would have been, this man walks in who is incredibly polite, and he is a strong Christian, at least he said so. And, he is kind and caring and respectful and like loves spending time with the family. Like my mom looks at this kid who would have been the same age as my brother and is like, oh my gosh, like I know she can't help it, but it's like, this is like my son. Mm-hmm. And that adds a whole other layer of like, a trust aspect to it, where it's not just like, I'm not just trusting you to spend time alone with my daughter. It's like, I'm trusting you like I would a son.
Right. And I think that he knew that, and he
abused it
and exploited that and used that for his own personal gain.
Okay. I feel like we've kind of like covered stuff with my mom. Obviously there's so many aspects to this that I could talk about for a really long time, but I really am interested in hearing about your experience telling your parents, especially because it was kind of a while after, and I think that your parents are very different than mine. And so I'm just interested to see how they responded.
So I told them about a year after. I told my mom directly after you called me and told me what happened, because now it was like, fuck, like this is real. We're going to press charges. I need to tell my parents. And frankly, I don't think I ever would have told them if it hadn't been for you being like, we're going to fucking press charges and we're going to do this.
Like for the court case in general, you think?
No, like if we hadn't done the court case.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever
then you wouldn't have told her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because like, I just don't like my parents worrying about me, and like, or maybe it's a pity thing. Like I don't like when people like pity me or feel bad for me. Like that is something I have a really hard time with. And so in my mind, I was like, well, I don't want them to like worry or feel bad. Like this isn't their fault. There was nothing they could have done. I wasn't even like living at home or near home or anything, And I knew that they were somehow going to like blame themselves, especially my mom. So those were kind of my thought processes going into this. And like, I just remember I got off the phone with Shannon and I was like, okay, like fucking gotta go do this. I remember I was like wrapped in one of my blankets from my room, and I just like walked downstairs. My mom's standing in the kitchen, and I was like, fuck, okay. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I was kind of just like, Mom, like something happened to Shannon. Like she was sexually assaulted, and it also happened to me. That was kind of the gist of what I said. It was very short. It was like one sentence. And then she just gave me a hug, and I cried, and she cried, and there wasn't a lot said. There was like not a lot of questions. It was just, I think from my mom's point of view, it was like, you need support right now. And like, I think she knew not to pry or not to ask questions. Like this is just a time to grieve. And obviously a lot of questions and stuff came later because she's my mom and she wanted to understand what happened. But that initial conversation was really short, and it like, there wasn't a lot of conversation at all. It was just kind of like, this is what happened, and then let me give you a hug and be there for you.
Because she realized that that's what you needed in that moment. So like, if you're a parent out there and you're hearing this information, or any sort of like maternal or paternal figure, like meet somebody in the middle, like meet them at
where they are. Yeah,
like what they need. And what they need right then and there is probably not an abundance of questions, but rather a hug, or just maybe asking them what do they need right now, or maybe a home cooked meal. Like,
yeah, I think it really
ask questions later. Comfort now, ask questions later.
Yeah, like you don't need judgment. You don't need prying. My mom was always very in tune with the fact that sexual assault is a huge fucking problem. When I first went off to school, she was very much like, hey, you gotta be careful. Like, you gotta cover your drink. Like, don't go to a party alone. You have to be on guard, which is fucked up. And it's fucked that was the advice I got when I was going off to college. It was like, hey, have fun, but also you're a girl, so you need to be on guard. And it shouldn't be like that. But my mom was very in tune with that. And so I think it was always a concern from her. And so I think that when I told her, it was just sheer heartbreak. I think
like her worst fears came true.
I think she was just really sad for me, and like sad with me. And I think that as my mom, like she did go through a lot of periods of time where she was like, I just want to know what happened. I just want to understand, like, how did this happen?
She would ask me sometimes. She would ask me for like updates on the case, like at family gatherings, kind of like pull me aside because I knew that you weren't really telling her a lot, which like totally understand. But I think she, you know, she did everything that she felt like she could to prevent this from happening, and then it did. And now I think, or at the time, I think she just wanted to know what was going on, but she didn't want to like disrupt how you were feeling.
Yeah. But I think that there was nothing she could have done. And
yeah, you can't protect your child from this.
You try, but especially if they're not living at home, they're not around you, they're not under your own roof. Like, there was nothing that she could have done. And I always told her that, but I think that as a mom, you are automatically going to place blame on yourself because it's your role to protect your kids. And when something bad happens to them, that is like the most heartbreaking thing that you can probably go through. So I think that was just kind of what she was feeling in that moment as well.
I also think, like, as a parent, obviously neither of us are a parent, but like, you know, you can't prevent this from happening, but you can, I guess, prepare for like if it does happen, which once again is like also really fucked up. But like, tell your kid that if something like this happens, like,
or just
go to the hospital, report it, like empower that sort of thing rather than like, yes, empower the have pepper spray with you and cover your drink and what have you not, but also give them the tools so that if this does happen, heaven forbid, at least they will have the tools to like fucking put someone in jail. You know what I mean? Like have some, like get some sort of evidence from it. Like really make that a focus of the conversations you have with your kids too. I don't think that's talked about enough. How else are they supposed to know? Like this isn't a how-to guide if you get sexually assaulted. It's, well,
it kind of is.
It kind of is, I guess. But the point is, you know, the same way that if you got into a car accident or if you were better example, if you were pulled over by a policeman, you know, you need to have your registration, you need to have your license. Like you put your hands on the steering wheel so that they understand that like you're not fooling in your pockets for anything. Like if you're sexually assaulted, like go to the hospital, call a friend, save the underwear from that night so that if you do in the future want to pursue a case, you have strong evidence that can help you out in that case.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that goes with education and awareness. You know, if you're like, I remember my freshman year of college, we did have those sexual assault courses you had to take, which I think like most colleges do. Ours was in person, which was different. I feel like a lot of them are online.
Yeah.
And they teach you about, you know, if you see something, go like intervene, make sure people are okay. But there isn't as much of like, okay, if this does happen, what are the next steps? That isn't really talked about, and there isn't any education on that. It seems like, at least not in the past few years when I've gone through it. So I think that is kind of just a gap in the education that needs to be filled, maybe.
Well, it's also a hard thing to, like, you know, you can go through a traumatic event and know, like, you may have learned the right things to do after it, but once you're in it and you're experiencing all those emotions and like perhaps you're just fucking frozen in time, like it's hard to be able to depend on yourself and know that like you could follow through with all those steps. But at least if we're telling these kids or educating kids on, you know, what to do if this does happen, then at least they have a fucking chance at, you know, getting someone convicted or getting justice or, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it looks different, especially in college. Colleges do have sometimes different protocols for what happens. So, you know, even having it like a college by college basis is really important because it does look different and that's really confusing. So if there is some sort of way,
it's not all standard.
It's not that schools can be like, if this happens to you, these are your next steps. This is what you should do. That would be really fucking helpful for people because flying blind, it's tough, man. It is really tough.
And like a lot of schools, at least in my experience, and I believe in your experience too, they might have like a specific office that you can go to that only deals with like sexual assault. So at my undergrad school, it was Office of Victim Assistant, so OVA assistants, yeah. And they were awesome. Like I went in I think a few months before trial happened. So that was almost 2 years after I'd been assaulted, but I was having a really hard time. I was super overwhelmed and stressed about the case. I was really overwhelmed with school. And it was just like my standard stress levels and anxiety levels were heightened because I had this, court case on the back burner, and it was just always kind of there. And they were great. They sent out a email to all of my professors, and like the professors know, like, oh shit, this is from the OVA office. And they don't give details about anything. They just say, hey, Shannon experienced something traumatic lately. You need to give her extra time on whatever and all this. And so if I was having like a really hard day where I couldn't get out of bed or I was experiencing an extreme amount of anxiety, I could get, assignments extended, and it helped me out a lot. Like there are resources and they're kind of hard to find and they're uncomfortable. Like you have to go in, you're probably going to have to share your story again, but in the long run, like they can really help you a lot.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with my school. Like they had a whole office that was for this, and I think that was like the only way that I got through being in school and going through all this was because they were just so helpful and so understanding, and they will do so much for you to make sure that you can like stay in school and be as successful as possible. So even understanding like where those resources are at, I think my school did a pretty good job at making that aware and making those resources known. But I know that maybe some schools don't, and it should be advertised more, just because unfortunately this is such a normal thing and it's such a common thing, and it's pretty common for people to go through this and then not know how to get help and what their next steps should be.
But guess what? So many people have been sexually assaulted and raped that entire offices and hundreds and probably thousands of jobs have been created to combat the post-sexual assault emotions.
Mm-hmm. And to combat just sexual...
We try again.
And to combat sexual assault in general, which is awesome because they do a lot of campaigns and awareness and education I would say they do a lot of prevention education to make sure that it doesn't happen, which I think we also need more of too, right? It's not just about resilience and what you do after. It's also about making sure this doesn't happen in the first place.
So to kind of like rewind a little bit, we just went off on a tangent because we're very passionate about this stuff, as you can tell. You had mentioned your mom's reaction. She like really was comforting towards you, and she gave you a hug and kind of basically gave you exactly what you needed in that moment. But like, what did your dad say? Because like, daddy's little girl getting assaulted, like, did he want to beat the shit out of this guy? Like, what was kind of his response?
Yeah, I was very interested to see how my dad was going to respond because I am very close to him. Like I'd say is like one of my best friends. I also like grew up with brothers, and I was his only daughter, and I think there was like a lot of protection over that, but also it was interesting because like he was not the parent that would get mad at me if I was like, if my clothes were too small or I wasn't like covering up enough. Like that was always my mom. It'd be my mom who's like, your shirt is too short. Like you need to put on like an actual shirt. My dad was always like, oh, you look great, honey. Like he never like really cared about that kind of stuff. And so not that that's like a bad thing or a good thing. Like it was just like a thing. Like he just like was like, yeah, if like you like what you're wearing, then that's great. And that was almost like really progressive of him in a way, which like looking back, I was like, okay, cool. But I think that like secretly, like you do want your dad to be somewhat protective over you. At least like maybe I did. And I didn't really get that a lot. And I don't want to say like wasn't protective, just like
your dad wasn't focused on what you were wearing. He was like more caring about who you are. Like
exactly.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't that like cliche,
I'm cleaning my shotgun when a man comes over.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. He wasn't like that. And I'm really like glad for that. Because I think that it created a really strong relationship between him and I, especially like in my teenage years when I thought that I knew everything and was a bitch.
Period. The end.
So when I was planning on telling him, it was kind of just like, oh, like, is he going to be that dad who's like, let me get out my shotgun and go fuck this guy up? Or like, what is he going to be like? And so I just had no idea. And I just remember like sitting on the couch. He was sitting on like the couch, like across from me. And I was just like, I couldn't stop laughing.
Fuck.
Like, I literally felt so goddamn uncomfortable. And when I get uncomfortable, I laugh. I just laugh. It doesn't matter what the situation is. I laugh. I laughed in court. Like, if I'm uncomfortable, I will start laughing because I just don't know what else to do. It's just like this weird coping mechanism.
Oh, heavens.
And so I am sitting on this couch. Like, I'm next to my mom. My dad's across from me. And I'm just cracking up. And my dad is like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what are you doing? I'm just like sitting there and I'm like dying laughing. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. This is not funny. Like, this is actually not funny. Like,
no, but like, actually, Dad, it's like not funny.
It's not funny. And I was just like, I think I probably said something similar to like what I said to my mom, where I was like, this thing happened to Shannon. It also happened to me. And I finally said it. I finally got it out there, and he was just silent.
Nothing?
Nothing.
And did
And
he have a look on his face? Do you remember?
I don't even know. Like, it was just so unemotional, and I don't...
Stunned.
What?
He was probably like stunned.
I think that's what it was. Like, deer in the headlights, like, you don't know what to do or you don't know what to say, and he kind of just like sat there for a little while. I didn't say anything. I think he was probably just like trying to like rein himself in and like collect his thoughts. But I think that his reaction, and I like don't remember very well, but I think it was more so, what are next steps?
Right. He was more like analytical.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom comforted you. Your dad was analytical, probably holding. I'm sure his protective side came out though. He probably was just like, that's not the important emotion to share right now. Like, the important thing is to be the stable, sturdy, like father figure right now.
Yeah.
Is what I would imagine.
Yeah. So that was like interesting. There was like very different reactions from the both of them, which I think was like good because both my parents are very different and they bring very different things to the table. Like when we were actually going through court, like my mom was very comforting and my dad knew that his role was like to bring humor and light throughout that week because that week was so fucked up and sometimes you just like wanted to laugh or wanted a distraction, and like my dad knew that was his role.
That was his job.
You know, like he was gonna bring normalcy, and like him and I would like literally go out like drinking at night together and just like have fun. And that's what he brought to that. And then like my mom was really that like comforting, supportive figure. So I think that kind of like came out in a way through their reactions. Like my dad was very much like, okay, this is like what you need right now. Maybe like, let's just like think about what your next steps are. And then my mom was also like, this is what you need right now, in the like supporting way.
So they like complimented it really well.
I'd say so.
Do you wish that you would have told them sooner?
So, that's what I did forget to mention. I dropped out of school a few months after this happened to me. And so my parents were like, what the fuck are you doing home? Like, why are you here? Like, they were not supportive of me dropping out of school, which is totally
dropping
fair.
out of, like, I think like dropping out of college and like if your parents are paying for it is like
it's a big deal.
It's a big no-no. It's not very chill.
It's not very chill. They were like, you cannot come home. And I was like, well, I don't care. And I was like really unwell. Like I wasn't going to classes. Like I was probably failing out of school. Like I was not okay. And I was like, this is what I need right now. And I can't listen to my parents. Like I can't.
Yeah. But you also couldn't tell them. So it was just this like, hey, I need to do this. But you couldn't even be like, hey, you just need to trust me. I'm really going through it. It was just a like. Also.
They were just like confused. And I think once I got home, it was pretty evident that there was something wrong. My mom kind of kept being like, what's wrong with you? Like, is something going on? I was like, no. Like, I don't really know what the fuck my problem is. Like, I didn't really give a good reason for why I was so depressed and having such a hard time. And this went on for months. Like, I was living at home. I was, like, doing stuff. Like, I was going to school. And
at a new school.
Yeah. So I was going to school out in California. I was, like, playing soccer for that college, like, things like that. And so, like, I had a life, like, I was doing things, but it was evident that there was just something that was wrong. And so then when I told my mom, you know, like, almost a year later, she was like, I knew it. Like, I knew something happened before you came home from school. Like, I knew that there was something, and I knew you just weren't saying it. This makes so much sense. Like, in her brain, like, everything just clicked, and she was like, oh, fuck. Like, that's why Lauren dropped out of school. That's why she came home. That's why she was having such a hard time. It's because this thing happened. So it was kind of this, like, huge realization moment of, like, she really was going through something. And so I think my mom always knew something had happened. Obviously, she didn't know exactly what. And so I think that if I were to go back, maybe I would tell them earlier. I don't think it would have been like a phone call. I think I would have like dropped out of school and then came home and been like, this is what happened. This is why I'm having such a hard time. And right now I just like need to be with my family and I need to like process and heal and just like explain that to them. Whereas I didn't. And for like pretty much a year, it was just this kind of blank, gray, weird space.
Yeah. And it's also because like, you have that fear of your parents will respond poorly, perhaps. And if they do respond poorly, it's just going to add more on top of everything else you're dealing with. But on that off chance that your parents, or on that chance that your parents do respond well, like they can be a really good point of support for you. And like my mom became a good point of support, I think about like 4 months after I had told her. That was when she started saying things like you need to believe in this. Like she started, that was the first time that I ever saw my mom really like be okay with me having really, really bad days. Like where she was like, I understand this is hard for you right now. Like eating might be harder. Maybe you're eating too much or whatever this is. Like but it took a while for her to kind of move through, I think, all those emotions of, personal guilt that she had for herself, as well as just like anger. And I understood that. Obviously it sucked for the first 4 months. But eventually she did get there, and then she was a really good kind of support for me.
So it was like a learning curve.
Yeah.
For your mom, at least.
Absolutely.
And at least she did get there, right? At least she did learn those things and understand what you did need. It wasn't like the whole time it was really this challenge to get her to understand, maybe. But it is tough. And as a parent, maybe you just really fucking don't know how to respond. And that's okay.
Valid, because you're not supposed to know. Like, you're not supposed to.
And you shouldn't.
You're not trained.
You shouldn't have to know.
Another thing, a little story, just to kind of demonstrate going from having a parent who really did not understand and who blamed me to going to having a parent who did understand. So I had shared earlier, when I first told my mom, she was really focused on drinking. And about a week and a half after I was assaulted, we were going to family Thanksgiving. And family Thanksgiving for my mom's side of the family, which is Lauren's side of the family, is very fun, very vibrant, very loud, very rowdy. Thanksgiving is like 50 people. We have like 14 pies, 3 different turkeys.
Party.
Yeah,
And we get
party.
Wasted.
And it's a great time, but it's a holiday. Everyone's celebrating. It's really fun. And my mom was incredibly nervous to go to Thanksgiving because, I had just been assaulted, and she was really worried that I was going to drink again there. And I had said, no, Mom, I'm not going to drink there. Well, spoiler alert, I did drink there. All of my cousins were we were all underage. Not all of us, but a lot of us were underage. And I remember I had poured Bacardi in my Sprite can, I believe. It was either Bacardi or vodka. I think I remember it being Bacardi. AKA potent scent, smelled like shit, smelled like liquor. And yeah, so everyone else was kind of drinking openly, but I had put liquor in my Sprite can. And my mom started to notice. And I thought for about 2 hours I was getting away with it. It was just this, I was really fun and vibrant, but no shit, Sherlock. Of course you're close to your mom and you're breathing on her. She's going to know. And I walked upstairs and my mom followed me and she put her arm around me and she said, "So what are you drinking?" And I said, "Sprite." And then she goes, "Oh, let me have a sip." And I knew I was fucked. I knew it. I'm like, "Well, here you go, Mom."
Didn't we try to step in?
No, no one was upstairs. I don't think anyone was upstairs. If you were, you guys scattered quickly once my mom took a sip.
She's scary.
But she took a sip of the Sprite can, and obviously, immediately she knew that's liquor. That is not Sprite in that can. And she started yelling at me. And in the yelling, in the midst of it, she was like, I was so worried that you were going to drink here. You promised me you wouldn't. I trusted you in this. And then she said, if you hadn't drank the night you were raped, you never would have been raped. Remember, this is Thanksgiving Day. A week and a half after I'd been assaulted. And
you're already in a really fragile state.
Yeah.
And then your mom says that to you.
Yeah, just very plain. If you hadn't been drinking on the night you were raped, you never would have been raped. And I have never sworn at my mom before, at least at this point I hadn't. And I looked at my mom in the eyes and I pointed at her and I said, fuck no.
I thought you said fuck you.
I don't know anymore.
It was either fuck no or fuck you, but either way, it was a fuck you.
There was a fuck in there, and that had never happened before with my mom. Like, I had never been that aggressive, but it was this overwhelming, like, you clearly have no idea what I'm going through, and you do not understand what I'm thinking right now, and how dare you take this moment of drinking at Thanksgiving, which is a family function. It is a safe function. I'm not driving anywhere. Like, this is a celebration. How dare you take me drinking here and relate it to something that I never asked for? Like, that connection felt super unfair to me and frankly really aggressive. And that certainly like put a rift in between us. After this Thanksgiving event, my mom said, you know, originally we weren't going to give you any consequences for drinking with your assailant at our house. But now, since you've drank at Thanksgiving because you disobeyed us, we are now going to give you consequences for drinking with your assailant, as well as consequences for drinking on Thanksgiving when I told you not to, which is really interesting.
Yeah, because the repercussions of getting raped aren't consequences enough.
Yeah, but I kind of felt like, I think if you get raped and you were drinking and your parents don't like drinking, it should kind of be a get out of jail free card for you as the victim, like, because that's not the important part. But with that being said, that was like a really awful moment for my mom, and she has come a long way, and like she's apologized for a lot. And what it took to get from A to B was it took her a lot of asking me questions, and it took a lot of me saying, look, Mom, you don't understand. It is not about drinking. It is about me being violated. It's about him being a serial rapist. It's about him not understanding the boundaries of my body. But it took a lot of that. But eventually we got to the better space where my mom literally would have hired a hitman if like I wanted her to. Like, she was so gung-ho by the end. She was so supportive. She was totally my rock. But it wasn't always that way.
I would just say that our parents did grow up in a different time, and like girls were taught to stay quiet and to not, you know, talk about these things. And there's a lot of blame placed. And I think that maybe that kind of social norm was coming out in how your mom was reacting, which is not an excuse, but it is just a way that, like I said before, society as a whole needs to start shifting and changing. Okay.
Can we do a summary?
So yeah, we talked about a lot. It was deep fucking shit. Blech.
We talk about peace, love, wubbz.
Peace, love, wubbz.
Talked about telling your parents good and bad reactions. If your parent has a shitty reaction, there might be hope for the future that they can
I would just
be
say
supportive.
Try to have them understand your place in your situation, but also maybe help them understand what it really means to be sexually assaulted and what that means in society, you know, and like be like, hey, like, maybe you thought this way at one point, but this is like how it actually is. And it's really important not to place blame on survivors because it is not their fault. And I think just having those really important conversations, make sure they're not arguments, right? I've definitely had some fucking arguments with people about this. It shouldn't be a goddamn argument. Like, just don't shame, don't blame. That's not what we're here. Like, that's not what we should be doing as communities, as societies, as schools, things like that. Like, just sit down with, if it's your parents, if it's your friend, whoever it may be, and just help them understand and just have those normal conversations that are really just trying to inform and educate. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and if your parent has a bad reaction, I'm really sorry. Like, there's nothing worse than like the person that birthed you being like blaming you for something that you literally had no part in. But use your resources. If your school has a sexual assault like resource that can like reach out to teachers for you, that can hopefully make things easier for you while you're going through this, like, do it. Like, it's uncomfortable, but it is 100,000% worth it.
And they want to help you.
And go listen to some Excision or Subtronics or something that gets that
or
that
Sia
grr in there. Or Sia.
She's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Some Kesha. Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong.
Thank you so much for listening to What They Don't Say.
We'll catch you later. Catch you on the flip side.
Catch you on the flip side.
Cheers.
Yeehaw.
Oh, now we're clicking.